another issue exercising Thomas Friedman's mind. He also argues is something we've all broken but don't yet own. His recent travels in China and the Middle East have convinced him that we're all Americans now. Our consumption of the world's energy resources is leading to dangerous climate change, and we might not be able to do anything about it. Thomas Friedman is the author of numerous books, his most recent being the updated, now 3.0 version of The World is Flat, which we spoke to him about just a few months ago. He joins us now in Washington. Thomas Friedman, thanks for being there.
Great to be with you.
Now, last Thursday, President Bush addressed the nation on Iraq. You described it as his farewell speech. Tell us why.
Well, I said that's because basically the president said the war is now going to be in the hands of General Petraeus. Whether Iraq succeeds is in the hands of Prime Minister Maliki of Iraq. And since the president said there are going to be probably at least 100,000 troops there after I leave, how the war ends is going to be in the hands of the next administration, most likely the Democrats. See ya, wouldn't want to be ya.
It is, if you look at it like that, and you can make that analysis, but of course he's also arguing you can't cut and run from Iraq. That would also be to abdicate American responsibility. The same argument, incidentally, we hear echoed here in Australia.
Well, you know, obviously no one wants to just pick up and leave and leave behind some kind of humanitarian disaster. But at the same time, just kind of dragging it out and waiting for the Iraqis to figure it out on their own also strikes me as slightly irresponsible. I feel like what's happened with the surge is that Iraq was like a person who had cancer and a really high temperature and a lot of swelling. And what the surge did was bring down the body temperature and the swelling, but we still got the problem of the cancer. And what do we do about it? Do we hope that it just goes into remission on its own? Does it need surgery or maybe chemotherapy? And right now, I find a lot of people are saying, well, the surge worked, yet we brought down the temperature, we brought down the swelling. But what do we do with the cancer?
Well, that is the obvious question I'm going to throw back into your corner now to see if you've actually got an answer. Because if America packs up and leaves and things get vastly worse, as, for example, they did in Yugoslavia when the world stood by and allowed ethnic cleansing on a huge scale, inevitably the world just has to step back in again.
Well, one thing we simply don't know is what would happen in Iraq after the U.S. pulls out. Certainly there would be violence there. Unlike Yugoslavia, a lot of the ethnic cleansings actually happened in Iraq already under our noses. The Shiites don't particularly want to rule Anbar province. The Kurds don't want to rule Basra. So the country has broken up to some extent, but not completely. There's still a lot of intermixing in Baghdad. It seems to me that, if I were President Bush right now, well, actually, if I were President Bush, I'd be curled up in a fetal position under my bed with my dog Barney barking for me to come out. But if I were President Bush right now, I think what I would be doing would be calling, America's best negotiator, whether it's Jim Baker or Henry Kissinger or Dennis Ross, and saying, look, I want you to go to Baghdad, and I don't want you to come home. I do not want you to come home without one of three things. Either an agreement resolving the underlying political dispute in this country, so we actually have a unified government, or a partitioned or radically federalized agreement to kind of divide this pie and use Baghdad as a kind of ATM machine, or your conclusion that this is an impossible situation, these people cannot live together, and we just have to get out.